Welcome back. So this is the weird part of the afternoon where I introduce myself. Hello again, I'm Monique Schafter and I'm a journalist for the ABC. I currently work on the 7:30 program, but I used to work on a much less conservative show called Hungry Beast, which was more of a mixture of like comedy and current affairs and really weird stuff. Outside of that, I make films occasionally, a few documentaries, and that's why we're here today, to talk to you about one of those. Joining me up here on the stage is Elizabeth Duck-Chong. Liz is also an aspiring filmmaker and an acoustic guitarist who currently works in graphic design and photography. And we have Ruben Cuda. Ruben spends most of his time creating artworks and scribbles, making mixed CDs, playing drums, or otherwise watching the X-Files. And we recently worked together on a little film, so take a look at the very start of it.
In my shoes, it's hard. Nothing's quite as straightforward.
It's fun. It's interesting.
At other times it can be really hard and pretty emotionally draining.
Being in my shoes is boring most of the time. I work 5 days a week, play guitar, and I'm really a totally uninteresting person who just happens to be transgender.
So that's the very start of a short film I recently co-directed with my friend Mat Govoni about what it's like growing up transgender. And just so you know, transgender is a term for people who don't necessarily identify with the sex or gender that they were assigned at birth. Well, I'm not transgender, so I'm not the best person to tell you what that's like, but unfortunately we have Liz and Ruben up here who are way more qualified to talk about it. But before we hear from these guys, I just wanted to give you a bit of a background on how the film came together. I was originally approached by a transgender woman in Sydney called Kate Doak and Talia Tribetz, who works for the Gender Centre in New South Wales, to help develop a short film that helped raise awareness about the issues facing young transgender people and to let them know that support is available. A new study conducted by La Trobe Uni and Beyond Blue into the mental health of people who are transgender revealed higher rates of depression, anxiety and suicidal thoughts. And as part of this research, they interviewed 190 people and found that almost half of them had been diagnosed with depression and almost all of them had experienced abuse of some sort, and that ranged from verbal threats to physical attacks. But the report also highlighted that support from family, friends and the community can make a huge difference to the mental health of young people and just create a better life for them. With that in mind, we set about developing In My Shoes, which we hope would be a platform for young trans people just to say what life is like for them. And we didn't just want to shine a light on the dark stuff, but we wanted to talk about the awesome stuff as well. And we also hope that this film would help explain to a broader community about what it's like to be young and transgender. So that's where it all began. Liz and Ruben are two of the 5 young people who courageously shared their personal stories in the film. So because this is a special TEDx event, rather than playing you the whole film, we're kind of going to relive the conversations that we had when we were making In My Shoes live for you on stage today. So, action. Just to start off, guys, the word transgender is still quite new for some people. They're not quite sure what it actually means. So maybe to start off, can you say what transgender means to you?
Well, you started off with a definition. Transgender is when you're born, you're assigned as either a boy or a girl, based upon usually, external or internal genitalia. And then transgender is just saying, well, I'm not that, I actually don't identify with that anymore. And usually that's very much going from either boy to girl or girl to boy, using the most basic terms we can. But for me being transgender, I was never a boy. That was never something that I identified with. I've always been a woman. It's just that some people didn't see it that way.
Cool. Well, how do you feel about the term, Ruben?
Well, I feel like being transgender is definitely a really important part of me. And I think that when people are born based on their appearance, they're kind of told you're a boy or you're a girl, and it's like they have a set expectation as to what they are going to grow up to be and who they are the second that they're brought into this world. And I realized that, through my life, that I wasn't what everybody was saying I was.
Cool. For this chat today, we're keen to look at, what it's like growing up transgender. What were you like as a kid?
I was like any other kid. I mean, I played around at home. I played with my siblings, drew and painted and went out on day trips and things like that. Gender was never really part of growing up. I don't think it is for many children. I mean, as much as parents try to, paint the nursery blue or pink or yellow if they're unsure. I mean, my room when I was growing up was blue, and look at me now, it doesn't make much difference. So yeah, it was a good childhood. It just gender wasn't a part of it.
Cool. What about you, Ruben?
Yeah, I found that personally when I was growing up, I didn't really feel a strong connection with gender. I was too busy just being a kid and, drawing and mucking around, and I personally, when it came to toys, I didn't really mind if it was a Barbie or, an action man. I was just playing.
And at what point did you start thinking that perhaps you are transgender?
Puberty, and puberty is a big one for a lot of trans kids. Hormones are changing your body. In primary school, I had lots of friends of all different, genders, and then puberty strikes, and suddenly everybody's changing, and you're changing in a way that is not actually a way that you want, and suddenly the differences are magnified between boys and girls, and so that was a big part of it, absolutely.
For some people, it's not that black and white, is it? It's not
yeah,
like all of a
it's
sudden,
definitely
hey,
not
I'm,
black and white.
I'm the other one.
Yeah.
There's like a bit of a grey area. Can you talk a bit about that?
I found that I've constantly just been coming out, and I just sort of realized that when I was younger, I never really thought about it, and then once I start to hit puberty, I just realized that something was up, but I couldn't quite place what it was. I didn't know what being transgender was. I didn't realize that other people were feeling this same way, and I felt very alienated. And so by the time I turned 15, I just realized, okay, this is it. I figured it out, and that's who I am.
And yeah, especially 10 years ago when I was starting to research this stuff, there wasn't much around online, and so I know, back being 12 and 13, some of my role models at that time were porn stars, not for the fact that they were in porn, but for the fact that they were transgender, and they talked about it, and no one else did. And my feminism is sex worker inclusive, but I don't think that porn stars are the right role models for 13-year-olds.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that more people coming out, the fact that we have so many amazing advocates is just fantastic, so that, back 10 years ago, a 13-year-old, I can look up and see musicians and actors and politicians, and that's a really big part of coming to terms with who you are and what your identity is. And
Yep.
I think that that's starting to happen, and we're starting that conversation.
Yep. And what was that early coming out period like?
It was tumultuous. I started coming out to friends and lost a few friends and made a few good friends. I mean, I came out to my parents quite early on, and I mean, they took longer to accept it than I wanted, but that's also because I'd been thinking about it for 4 years longer than them at that point, so any amount of time was too long, and they dealt with it really well. I mean, as I said, I lost some friends. When I eventually came out properly, a large group of friends disappeared, and more have come up since. But I mean, coming out is constant. This video is going to go online, and some of my friends are going to see it, and I'm going to be coming out to them for the first time. Like, it's never all out in the open once and for all. It's a constant thing, and so that's something to be aware of.
Yeah. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it's definitely a constant thing. I find myself having to come out over and over, whether it's legal or to new people that I meet that I want to share a part of myself with. And I found that when I was first coming out, that it was difficult because I wasn't only coming out to myself, I was coming out to my family, to my friends, to my school, because I was still in school, and so I couldn't go about it quietly. It was as if everyone was going to know. And it was quite difficult because when I didn't just come out as transgender at first. Like, at first I came out as a lesbian, and then I realized that wasn't quite right. I still like boys. And then I came out as genderqueer because I didn't feel very strongly male or female, and I felt like that was a term that really fit me, but people don't like the idea of not having one or the other, not being strictly male or female. People don't see it as legitimate, but at the time, for me, that was legitimate, and that's changed now. But when I came out as a trans man, I realized that for parts of my life, I'm probably going to have to keep coming out, and that's just how it's going to have to be.
Yeah.
And I really think it's important to point out that, you know, my femininity and my womanhood doesn't confirm any sort of binary. The fact that we're transgender and transgender is seen as, and usually is from, you know, one to the other, per se. It doesn't actually mean that there is only two. I mean, I think, as Ruben was saying, the whole genderqueer thing is, that was something I realised I identified with as a child. And it's really important to understand more than just these male and female identities and accept them and talk about them.
Yeah, and to realise it's more of a spectrum than rather a black and white.
Right. And what are some of the other misconceptions that people might have about trans people?
Well, everyone seems to think that you're only truly male or truly female when you've had the surgery, as if there's only one possible surgery and it happens overnight, and as if, you know, everyone seeks that and everyone wants that, and as if everyone is capable of doing that. And it's not the case. Not everyone goes on hormones, not everyone has surgery, and it doesn't make how they identify any less legitimate.
And there's also all sorts of societal things. I mean, it's well documented that transgender people have a harder time at school, have a harder time getting and keeping jobs, finding housing. I mean, transgender kids are disproportionately homeless. There are all sorts of issues that are very wide issues for the community, but are especially issues for transgender kids because there's so much misinformation and so many people reject children who display these things and talk about these things and identify with these things. And I think school is a really important one because oftentimes your biggest bullies growing up are your teachers and the administrators and not actually the friends around you. I had a fairly okay time at school, but for example, I wasn't allowed to formal. And you know, small things, but they do personally affect you. And then there are, of course, kids doing a lot worse than I am who are kicked out of schools or who are bullied at school, or have teachers attacking them verbally and being abusive. And those are really major issues for kids everywhere.
How do you deal with that? And when you do need support, where do you get it from?
Friends and family, I've found. I mean, it's not always an option for some people. Sometimes there isn't going to be somebody there to hold your hand and be next to you and to really help you through it. But I found that even when in physical interaction with other people that were in my life, when that wasn't always available, I actually turned to the internet and found that there were other people feeling exactly how I was, and it was a matter of reaching out and talking about it and starting a conversation.
Well, the internet is how I figured out my identity. It's helped me confirm it. It helped me find other people who felt the same way and communicate with them. And I mean, one of my hobbies now is going on the internet and talking with people and helping new trans kids and actually talking to them and helping them undergo their journey and deal with the first steps, which can be so difficult. So I think, like for me too, my friends and family were huge. My family have been amazingly supportive, but I also have the privilege to be still in contact with my family. I mean, it's so well documented that trans kids don't have that, especially in more conservative communities, that parents just refuse to understand and are part of a society that doesn't understand, and the kids are kicked out of home, and it's a major problem.
Support definitely makes a really big difference in our lives. It really changes how things can go for us and really affects our future.
I would say our ability to sit up here and talk to everybody here is because we've been so supported and we've had such amazing family and friends. And there are so many people who haven't got this far or, you know, don't have this ability because that's not there. It's really important.
Yeah. I imagine you get asked some dumb questions. Can you tell us about those and how you slap people when they come at you with them?
Well, the big one is, of course, genitalia and bodies and things like that. The number of times I've gotten asked about my genitals as if it's part of public knowledge.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a very strange thing. Nobody else really seems to get that. You know, I'm in a relationship and people will come up to me and, you know, ask how it works.
Yeah.
It's like,
how do you function?
I don't ask you that.
Yeah, exactly. I don't need to know all the invasive details and ins and outs of how your body and how your relationships work. And people don't realize that when they're asking these things, it's an invasion of privacy, it's sexual harassment, really. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, other questions, I guess, I get asked about my history a lot, about my gender history in my past, and I get asked about wider issues. It's whenever you're kind of the person somebody knows about something. If you're the gay friend, you get asked about the gay issues. It's the same being trans. And we're up here because we have been given this amazing opportunity and we choose to be, and so we are talking about this. But I think, you know, in my day-to-day life, I don't answer anybody's questions. I deal with it incredibly sarcastically because that's not what I'm here for.
Yeah.
As I said, I'm very boring ordinarily. I just like to enjoy my life, and being trans is actually a part of me that is not always open.
Yeah. Who are some of the role models that you guys look up to these days?
Laverne Cox. Laverne Cox, I feel like she has made a really positive difference, especially for young trans women. And to be in a position where your voice can reach so many people, I feel like it's definitely making a difference. With people like that, we are able to be here today and to actually talk about this, and for it to be okay to talk about.
And for me, Janet Mock is one of my icons and heroes. And yeah, it's seeing people in public, seeing people more than, again, just porn stars and like adult entertainers who are transgender and talk about it and educate the public about it, I think is just amazing and so important.
This might be a cheesy question, but what is the best thing about being you?
I think being trans has meant I've had to have a lot of, you know, inner thinking going on over the past few years to figure this out. I've had to argue my case more than a couple of times to more than a few people. And so I think I'm very sure of myself. I know who I am and what I'm like, and I have a really good sense of myself. And I think that has come about through my journey and through my struggle.
Nice one. What about you, Ruben?
I think I'm pretty fun to be around at times, so there's that. But I think that experiencing all of this has definitely made me a lot more open and a lot more comfortable with exploring myself and with understanding that with learning comes unlearning, and that, you know, we're always changing. Like, we're always getting this new information, and it changes us and it helps us grow, and I feel proud of myself to realize that the importance of that, and try and be the best that I can be, really.
We're going to show you guys a little bit more from the film in just a sec. Before we do, the film's gotten a pretty big reaction, right? So, you know, we made it for the Gender Centre in New South Wales, and it's got nearly 20,000 YouTube views, so you can even watch the whole thing on YouTube if you like. It's been screened in Parliament. It's attracted praise from your icon, Janet Mock, who's an author, and supermodel Andrea Pejic. It's been played in Belfast. It's been translated into French. It's going to play on ABC2 later this year. Jackie Braw, who's the New South Wales Police LGBT project officer, she's going to use the film in police training programs, which is pretty important. And it's soon going to be screened in schools across Australia, New Zealand, and in the UK. So how does that make you feel now?
Well, I mean, I want to hear what I sound like in French.
Oh, incredibly excited. I'm amazed that it has come this far. I never expected the kind of reception that it's gotten, and it makes me feel wonderful.
Awesome. Well, thanks to you guys for being part of it. If you can give Liz and Ruben a big clap, and then we'll finish with some of the film.
I have friends, and they're the best support that I could have.
You definitely have to stick with people that are not only just okay with who you are, but celebrate who you are.
My family just loves me for me, and I'm very grateful for that. Sometimes I do feel down, and I just remind myself, hey, I'm here. You've done great. Just get through it.
We're just trying to live our lives like anyone else, and we're not going to bite. Like, we're not going to attack you in the street. I'm slowly looking at myself for longer periods of time in the mirror. It's been years since I've gone to the beach. As soon as I get my surgeries and that's all finished, I cannot wait to do something like that. I would like to have kids in the future. I think I'd be a good dad. Like, I like kids, I'd play with them, teach them right from wrong, support them.
There is no right way to be transgender. Same way, you know, there's no wrong way to be yourself. And this idea of having to tick boxes and fit into things and be a certain person is just so old-fashioned, it's ridiculous.
This is my life and this is my body and it's not yours, and if you're not okay with it, I'm sorry, but I'm not gonna change for you, I'm changing for me. I'm pretty happy in my shoes.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Cheers.